Welcome back. You're watching the Tuesday edition of Business Morning on Channels Television, and we're coming to you live from our studios here in Lagos, Nigeria. Well, on the program today, we'll be focusing on the latest developments as regards the single currency for West African Monetary Zone, which we know has been in the pipelines for some time now. And the central banks of the countries who actually make up the WAMs are very keen to see this launched in January 2015. But how feasible is this going to be? Especially since there's so many criteria that they have to meet before they can actually go ahead with the launch. It's been postponed a couple of times, 2003, 2005, 2009, and now it seems they might not be able to make the 2015 deadline. But let's talk more about this, and I'm being joined on the program by the Director General of NASIMA, Mr. John Isemide, and Mr. Gabriel Idahosa, an economist and CEO of Uhimaji, that's UHY Maji. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Good morning, and thank you for coming in.
Good morning, my viewers.
First of all, let's just look at it. Is West Africa actually ready for a single currency? Mr. Isemide, let me start with you.
Thank you very much. We are not ready, we are not prepared. I've been on this project for over 10 years. Let me take it from three phases. In the European Union that we have today started as EEC. And what put EEC together was a negotiation that started in 1955. By 1957, the Treaty of Rome was signed. By January 1st, 1958, we had the EEC office in Belgium. And it was started by only 6 members: France, West Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. And structures were put in place. First was Assembly, the Court of Justice, the Common External Tariff, and the incentives. And as others were progressing, the United Kingdom, Scotland, Netherlands, and all that joined. But in the case of West Africa, prior to Ecowas, Nkrumah has put a formidable body in place, which is Mali, Ghana, and Guinea. We heard of Senegambia and the Francophone group. In 1975, Ecowas was put in place. 15 out of the 16 members started at once. But we still have to give it to General Yakubu Gowon and Yansigbe Yedema. It was in 1981 that Cape Verde joined. How have we fared? In a sub-region of 60 countries at that time, with 10 different currencies, only one was convertible, this French CFA, because it was tied to the French franc. Now that the French franc has been taken over by the EU, by the common currency in Europe, that is still the only convertible currency. So if we now look at the scenario, are we just copying others? In a sub-region, even the CFA you're talking about, this currency was introduced during the Second World War to pay the West and Central African soldiers. And that currency for 73 years has been tied to the French franc. The central bank is in Dakar, but the great control comes from the Francophone office in France.
Let me ask you to hold your thoughts there for me. Mr. Idahosa, do you share his view as well? Is West Africa not ready for this common currency based on what he said?
Well, it's not just anyone's view. It's the facts on the ground. You look at the countries. Just take only the big countries: Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal. Ghana this year, the CD has gone down about 35%. Inflation in Ghana is 15%. Now, how do you converge that economy with Nigeria that has kept inflation under 8%? And currency stable about just plus or minus 5 to 10%, around 150 naira to the dollar. So it's like you want to mix apples with oranges and you want to get something out of it. So it's not anybody's opinion, it's just the facts on the ground.
Yeah, but you see, he actually mentioned that, these countries, as in the Francophone countries, before they actually thought about having a single currency, they came up with initiatives, to make sure that they were ready. one of which was a common external tariff, which we know that the Ecowas states are trying to get, which is supposed to actually be launched by January. So that's a step. They're actually making a step towards ensuring that they are ready. And then they also have a variety of criteria that they've given themselves. If you just permit me to read some of them out: single-digit inflation, a fiscal deficit of not more than 4% of the GDP, a central bank deficit financing. These are the primary criteria that they're supposed to have, not to mention the secondary ones. There are about 10 criteria. We have the tax revenue should be equal to or greater than 20% of the GDP, a positive real interest, a stable real exchange rate. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I know that most of the viewers actually also, understand what it is that these criteria are supposed to be. But most of the African countries that actually make up WAMs already have most of this. Well,
they happen not to have them. That is the issue. You just mentioned exchange rates. You just mentioned deficits. These criteria are there. Nigeria has managed to meet a lot of these criteria, but the other countries haven't. Even if you take only the big countries, as Mr. Isemede was saying, if you just say, let us even start with Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, these 4 countries are still struggling to meet this criteria.
But Ghana said they actually met the criteria
by 2011. It's not what they said. It's not what they said. The facts are there today. If you check the Ghanaian economy today, the Ghanaian cedi has come down more than 35% since January. Inflation is over 15%. So it's not anybody's opinion. So those criteria you read out are very clear. Everybody needs to meet it before you set a date. You don't set a date for a common currency when those criteria have not been met. First, you meet those criteria, and then you run it for some years. Are we all keeping a deficit of 4%? Are all our exchange rates within a certain band? Is our tax revenues covering our basic cost of running the country? Is our exchange regimes stable? Is movement of goods and services across all the countries free-flowing? You don't have to spend 3 hours at any borders. All these things have to be running for about 4 or 5 years. And then a common currency emerges by the fact that you can take your naira to Ghana from January to December, spend it, and the exchange rate is about the same. And you go to Gambia with your naira, you change it to Dalasi, the exchange rate is about the same. That happens for 3 or 4 years, and you say, fine, we are all good. Then we want to have a common currency. You don't sit in a room and say we want to have a common currency when what is happening on the street is not exactly that.
Mr. Isemede,
thank you.
It's very clear that we seem to be focusing so much on the monetary aspect. What about the fiscal and the financial side? How important is it to ensure that the WAMs, as in the single currency, the ECO, actually gains fusion? Maybe not even next year, maybe 4 years from now, just like Mr. Isemede said.
When we are talking of single currency, I think we are putting the cart before the horse. I am not a visitor in West Africa. I have moved across West Africa by road, and I have worked in more than 6-7 countries. What you hear in seminars and workshops are people who are just coming there to tell us what they assume. This is the first time that the government is actually challenging the private sector. That we are now talking and say this is not possible. In the sense that if you now look at West Africa, take Nigeria for instance, a population of 170 million, GDP of 510, and we are about national GDP of 510 and per capita income of $3,000. The exchange rate, how stable it is, hovering between 150 and 160. And in that same sub-region we have Ghana, population of 25 million, 41 billion GDP, 1,650 per capita income, and you are talking of this cedi exchange today are between 3.2 to 3.5. As I'm telling you now, the cedi are depreciated by over 300% within a period of 6 years. Because as at the time, that was in 2007, when the redenomination, 4 zeros were cancelled. The cedi was 1.3 to $1. And what was 1.3 6 years ago is now 3.5 to 3.2 to the US dollars. You can see the fiscal and monetary policies that people who are on the street hawking the dollars and pounds and hawking the naira and the cedi are much more powerful, in the sense that there is no proper what we call sensitization. A lot of people come from Ghana to come to Aspanda, to come to My 12 and order to buy things. Are they aware of this single currency? All right, let us digress a little. We have in Europe, before they started, the first thing they did was custom union. Custom union in the sense that you have the same laws guiding you. But in West Africa, the story is different. In Nigeria, VAT is 5%. In Benin Republic and other Francophone countries, it is 18 plus 2, 20%. Ghana was 15, now it's 17%. We are only talking of a sub-region, not a custom union. So, if a Nigeria is doing business with an average Beninois, it is import and export. If you are doing business with a Ghanaian, it is import and export. But a Beninois doing business with a Senegalese, a Malian, it is arrival. Because the way we look at West Africa, from the Anglophone end, is not the way the Francophones are looking at it. We may now say, what of Guinea? Guinea is not part of the CFA zone. These are some of the things we have to know. So a lot of government officials are not aware of this arrangement.
So definitely, this is not going to, it's going to hurt Nigeria's economy more than, profiters, because in fact, the Minister of the Coordinating Minister of the Economy actually said so. She says rushing to adopt this single currency will hurt Nigeria more than the other countries.
I strongly disagree with you, in the sense that in the 80s, when the naira was, when the US dollar was exchanged at between 50 and 55 naira, the naira was more or less the strongest currency in the world. It was the naira that was used in the whole of West Africa. All right, in 1992, when the Noma came, that was a clear indication that the CFA franc does not belong to the Francophone countries, because even the government and the people in the Francophone have no control over interest rate or the exchange rate. The first devaluation of 1994, Ghana and Nigeria cannot devalue currency the same day. But the entire Francophone currency was devalued first by 60%, 40%, and another 26% by France. And the first group, riot started in Senegal, from there to Mali. And the people of Niger said they are very close to Nigeria, they are protected. The people in Difa said they will adopt the naira. But our inability to manage the naira has created a problem. So if we now say that we adopt the common currency, how did it work in Europe? Ghana, that's supposed to partner with Nigeria. We are talking of a single currency. We don't even have a central bank.
That's in Ghana.
No, we don't have Ecowas central bank.
Well, that's
what we are putting now is that by the time we have to put the bank first, Nigeria and Ghana has to start, but the rate at which the cedi is depreciating may not even help the economy. All right, take for instance Gambia. Gambia, the dalasi is exchanged at 40 to the US dollars. So we have to put our house in order and put the sub-region together as one body. It's not the BCAO on one hand and the Anglophone or the non-CFA zone in one group. Because it will not work, because what we are hearing from government is single currency. You cannot take a currency that does not belong to you overnight. And France will not release that currency to you in a jiffy.
That's the CFA.
The CFA, it does not belong to them. Because in Benin Republic, there is no central bank. What they have is a currency center. What you have in Abeokuta is equivalent to what you have in Benin. What we have in Benin is equivalent to what we have in Abidjan. That is why when they are trading among themselves, they don't go to the clearing house.
Mr. Idahosa, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, essentially, again, these are the facts on the ground. It's not that we like or we don't like. You see, some people feel, is it a good idea? Should we have a common currency, the benefits, and so on? Essentially, having a common currency means that you can walk around from Dakar to all the way to Calabar with just one currency in your hand or in your ATM, in every ATM or in your wallet. And that's what it's supposed to be. But that single currency is at the very top of layers of several things, which we are now discussing. The fiscal policies of all the countries. For example, all the countries, can they keep to 4% budget deficits every year? most of the countries cannot, because they don't, as Mr. Isemede is saying, many of these countries do not control their budgets. Some of them have their budgets controlled by France. France determines for them what level of deficit they will carry. So you have about 6, 7 countries, French-speaking countries, who are controlled by a non-member of Ecowas from France. You have the other countries that are in complete disarray. Nothing has been organized between them. So you want to mix these people, these English Anglophone countries that are struggling to get organized, with France that is controlled by France in everything, in your monetary policy, in your fiscal policy, in your tax regime. So what you have is, you can see, it's just mayhem. Nothing is organized for it to happen. So what you want to do is to take a very long distance race and say, over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, what can we do? In January, hopefully, we will get a common external tariff. That is, if it's achieved, that is one step. So all the countries in West Africa will have a common external tariff. If we achieve that in January, then in the next 2 years, we start to talk of the fiscal policy, our taxation, VAT rate, for example, personal income tax rate, company income tax rate. Now we have 5% VAT in Nigeria, as he has said, from 15 to 18 in several countries. How many years will it take for all of us to agree on one rate? For Nigeria, we don't want to go more than 5%, because 5% is good enough. Because of our population, we raise enough revenue. The other countries don't want to come to 5% because their population is so small. The Gambia has 1.5 million people. If you put VAT at 5%, they will collect very little. So these are structural issues that you cannot resolve in 2 or 3 meetings.
Mr. Isemede actually mentioned the creation of the West Africa Central Bank. It's something that is in the pipeline because you've talked about it. Now that we're talking about the implementation implementation deadline for the CET to start off in January as well, might it not also be a bad idea if they begin to think about also introducing the West Africa Central Bank at the same time?
The WAMI, the West African Monetary Institute, that runs WAMs from Ghana, is supposed to be the nucleus of a future West African Central Bank. But these are the issues the Central Bank is going to deal with. How does a West African Central Bank manage a Naira as it is today, stable around 150, and manage a CD that is fluctuating 300% over 4 or 5 years, and then the Gambian currency? So the West African Bank as an institution can sit there. But how does it control all of these issues? Rather, what you need is the government of each of the countries, the presidents of each of the countries to agree, have the political will, first to say among themselves, let's take the convergence factors. First of all, budget deficit. Is every country in West Africa ready to commit to a budget deficit of 4%? Are the French countries ready to say to France, we will have to decide our budget deficit, not you, France? So those things have to be agreed. Otherwise, the central bank will just be like the WAMI that is there in Accra that is doing nothing. It is up to the presidents of these countries to agree, for example, that we will have to make some sacrifice on VAT. Nigeria, you move up to about 7%, 7.5%. We come down from 15% to 7.5% and agree on a rate. On personal income tax, all the countries in West Africa, Nigeria is doing about 24% maximum personal income tax. All other countries have to say, where we are doing 30, 40%, we come down. All those convergence factors you listed have to agree one by one by political will. It is political will you need. It's not setting an institution. A West African Central Bank that is just sitting there with each president doing his own thing across 15 countries, it's just a waste of resources.
In fact, we're going to come back and continue from that point, but let's take a quick break, catch our breath, and continue the conversation. You're watching Business Morning on Channels Television. We're coming to you live from our studios here in Lagos, Nigeria, and the conversation on the program this morning has been on the Ecowas single currency. Of course, we know that there's a set date for the WAMS, that's the West African Monetary Zone, to actually implement a single currency by January next year. Seems like it's not going to be feasible. In fact, they already started saying it. So the central bank governors for the countries had already started saying that it might not be realizable because not all the countries have actually met the criteria. But we'll continue the conversation. I still have both gentlemen with me in the studio, and they'll be here with me when I come back.